The galaxy was vast, but nothing could have prepared the billionaire alien queen for the discovery she was about to make. Her missing daughter, the one she searched for tirelessly, was found tucked away in the arms of a humble janitor. How could this simple human have found her? And why had her daughter been living in the vents of the sprawling alien metropolis? As the truth begins to unravel, a bond forms between the unlikely savior and the alien child, one that could change the fate of an entire empire. Before we dive into this incredible story, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if you're moved by stories of unexpected connections and powerful secrets, hit that subscribe button because the next chapter will have your heart racing. Alias Ward never expected his routine to change. The flick of his mop, the hum of his vacuum, the soft rattle of his cleaning supplies, these sounds had been his constant companions for years. Working in the heart of the alien metropolis, cleaning beneath the towering citadel where the galaxy's elite gathered, Elias was nothing more than a shadow, unnoticed and insignificant. His presence was a quiet blur, no different from the dust and grime he scrubbed away with careful, practiced motions. But today was different. As he swept the halls of the Grand Palace, his eyes caught an unusual movement from the corner of his vision. It was a small figure, a girl huddled in the corner of the vent shaft. Her eyes were wide, a mixture of curiosity and fear as she peered out from the darkness. Her skin was pale, almost glowing in the dim light, and her hair shimmered in shades of blue and green, like the stars beyond the city's glassy domes. Elias froze. He didn't know who she was, but he knew she didn't belong here. She had been hiding, watching him for days. Carefully, he approached, unsure of what to say. The girl didn't flinch. Her eyes met his, and for a brief moment, the world outside the palace seemed to vanish. There was something unsettling about her quiet presence, but also something incredibly familiar. "Are you lost?" Elias asked softly, his voice barely a whisper. The girl didn't speak, but she nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement of her predicament. Elias's heart tightened as he looked around, ensuring no one was watching. In this palace of alien royalty, where whispers carried the weight of empires, a missing child wasn't a simple matter. The girl slowly extended her hand toward him. Her fingers trembled slightly as if she wasn't sure whether she could trust him. Without thinking, Elias took her hand in his. Her touch was cool, fragile, and the bond between them felt immediate, as if the universe itself had brought them together. "Don't worry," Elias said, his voice soft but steady. "I'll help you." But even as he spoke, he couldn't shake the sense that this encounter would change everything. For both of them. The palace halls felt different now, colder, more suffocating, as if they too had become aware of the secret Elias had just uncovered. He moved carefully, his eyes darting between the shadows and the intricate stone patterns beneath his feet. The girl, still silent, clung to his side like a fragile wisp of wind. She was so small, so out of place amidst the grandeur of the palace, yet Elias couldn't ignore the weight of her presence. He led her to a secluded alcove near the service corridors, hoping to shield her from the prying eyes of the palace guards. As they reached a safe corner, Elias knelt down, his hand gently brushing through the girl's hair. There was something hauntingly beautiful about her, but beneath the surface, something far darker lingered, an undeniable sense of loss. "Where did you come from?" Elias whispered, almost to himself. Her eyes flickered up to his, a glimmer of understanding in them. Yet she remained silent, her lips pressed together in quiet defiance. The words she seemed to speak were more than language. They were the deep, unspoken understanding that only those who had been hidden from the world could truly know. Suddenly, a sharp sound broke the silence. The heavy thud of boots echoed down the corridor. Elias stood immediately, his heart racing as he scanned the area. The last thing he needed was to be caught with a runaway child in the heart of the palace. The guards were relentless in their searches for anyone who didn't belong, and right now, the girl was the furthest thing from belonging. He gently pulled her back, out of sight, and pressed himself against the cold stone wall. His pulse quickened as he watched the guards pass by, their footsteps slow and deliberate. His mind raced with thoughts. How could a child like her have hidden so perfectly in the palace, and why had she stayed in the vents, alone, for so long? Once the guards passed, Elias breathed a sigh of relief, but before he could turn back to the girl, a voice suddenly boomed from the corridor. "Where is she?" It was unmistakable. The voice of the Queen, the one who had ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, whose presence filled the halls like a storm before a tempest. Elias could feel the air shift as her aura seemed to fill the room, suffocating him in its weight. The girl tensed beside him, her eyes wide with fear, and Elias instinctively moved closer, shielding her from view. The Queen's footsteps grew louder, and soon she appeared at the entrance of the alcove. Her eyes scanned the room with the precision of a hunter, though there was no sign of anger, only quiet, desperate concern. Elias met her gaze, his heart racing. "She's not here, Your Majesty," Elias said, trying to remain calm. The Queen's eyes locked onto his. She said nothing for a long moment, but in the silence, Elias felt the weight of her scrutiny, the depths of her unspoken grief. Then, as quickly as she had come, the Queen turned on her heel and vanished back down the hall, her presence lingering like an unspoken question in the air. Elias exhaled slowly, turning back to the girl, whose trembling hand had found his once more. "She's looking for you," he said quietly. "You're safe here. I won't let them take you." And though his words were meant to reassure her, deep down, Elias knew that he was far from prepared for the storm that was about to come. The Queen stood at the heart of the palace, the weight of her crown pressing down on her. The palace, alive with activity, seemed silent to her. Her thoughts were consumed by one thing, the daughter she had lost. For years, the princess had vanished without a trace. The Queen had searched tirelessly, following leads that always led nowhere. But now, a new lead had appeared. A janitor, Elias Ward, was seen with the girl. The news stirred something deep within her. How could I have missed this? She wondered, the grief creeping in. She had been so focused on power, on keeping the empire intact, that she hadn't noticed her own child was gone, hiding in plain sight. A voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Your Majesty," the advisor said, "Elias Ward has the girl." The Queen's heart skipped a beat. Elias Ward, the human janitor. How had he found her? "How is she?" the Queen asked. "She's different," the advisor replied. The Queen's pulse quickened. She had to see her daughter, to understand what had happened. Without another word, the Queen moved quickly through the palace, the halls growing colder as she approached the room where Elias had been seen with the girl. The door creaked open, and she heard their voices, soft, murmured. Elias looked up when she entered, his face calm but guarded. The girl sat beside him, a silent presence, her eyes alert. "Your Majesty," Elias greeted, his voice steady. "She's been hiding in the vents." The Queen's heart sank. Her daughter, lost for so long, had been living in the darkness. She moved closer, gazing at the girl who seemed more like a stranger now. The girl's eyes met hers, and in that quiet exchange, the Queen felt a shock. This was her child, but different, shaped by isolation. "I've been waiting for you," the girl whispered, her voice soft but carrying the weight of years. "I didn't want to be found." The Queen's breath caught. Her daughter hadn't just disappeared. She had hidden from the world, from her. The pain of that truth struck the Queen deeper than she could express. "I'm here now," the Queen whispered, kneeling beside the girl. "I will never leave you again." But even as she spoke, she couldn't escape the fear that it might already be too late to heal the wounds of abandonment. Would her daughter ever truly trust her again? Elias couldn't shake the image of the girl, huddled in the shadows of the palace vents. The silence between them was thick with unspoken words, yet it wasn't uncomfortable. The girl had lived here for years, surviving alone in the forgotten spaces, hidden from everyone, even the Queen. The Queen, though she had found her daughter, remained distant. She studied the girl with a longing in her eyes, but there was no easy reconciliation. How could there be? The girl had been alone for so long, living in the dark, away from the luxury of the palace. How could the Queen, a ruler of such an empire, ever truly understand her child's world? "We need to get you out of here," Elias said quietly, looking at the girl. His voice held a resolve that surprised even him. She didn't belong in these shadows anymore. The girl looked up at him with wide eyes. "I've been hiding," she whispered, her voice soft but steady. "I don't want to go back. Not to her." not to anyone. Elias could feel the weight of her words. The girl had been abandoned, not just by her mother, but by the system that had failed her. The Queen's empire wasn't a place of safety for her. It was a prison. "I'll protect you," Elias said, more to himself than to her. "You won't be alone anymore." The girl reached out, her hand trembling. She wasn't used to trust. But there was something about Elias, something in the quiet strength of his words that made her believe. Suddenly, the door to the alcove opened, and a figure stepped in. The Queen. Her presence filled the room like a storm, and the air became heavy with the unspoken tension between mother and daughter. Elias moved to stand, but the Queen's gaze stopped him. "Is she all right?" The Queen's voice cracked, her eyes focused on the girl who had barely looked up since her entrance. "She's scared," Elias answered softly, his eyes meeting the Queen's. "She's been hiding in the vents, alone, for too long." The Queen's eyes softened, but she did not step forward. The walls between them, between mother and daughter, were still too thick. "I never meant for this," the Queen said quietly, almost to herself. "I thought I was protecting her by keeping her away from the world. But I was wrong." The girl's eyes flickered to her mother, a mixture of confusion and sadness. "You left me." The words stung, a truth so sharp it cut through the Queen's defenses. She swallowed hard but didn't speak. There was nothing she could say that would make up for the years lost. "I'm here now," the Queen said finally, her voice breaking. "And I'll make it right, if you'll let me." The girl remained silent, but Elias could see the flicker of hope in her eyes. For the first time, it seemed like there might be a chance to rebuild what had been broken. Elias didn't sleep much that night. The weight of what he had promised to the girl, and now to the Queen, pressed heavily on his shoulders. In the quiet of the palace, he could hear the distant hum of machinery, the faint footsteps of servants, but none of it mattered. His thoughts circled back to the girl. Her quiet voice still echoed in his mind. "I don't want to go back." How could he protect her from an empire that had abandoned her? From a mother who didn't even know how to reach her? He knew that his life, simple as it was about to change. Elias had no real power, no status beyond being a janitor, but in this moment he realized that it wasn't about power, it was about duty. The Queen had already come to him, asking for help in the most vulnerable way. And now she was in danger, not from enemies, but from her own people. The nobles, the guards, even the very system she ruled over could turn against her if they knew what she had allowed to happen. If they knew the princess had been living in the vents for all these years. The doors to the small alcove opened, and the Queen entered, her eyes tired but determined. She was no longer the untouchable monarch. She was a mother, seeking redemption. "We need to make sure she's safe," the Queen said quietly, her voice steady but edged with urgency. "There are those in the palace who will use this against me. If they find out, they'll destroy her." Elias nodded. He didn't fully understand the political game the Queen was playing, but he understood fear. The kind of fear that kept you hiding in vents, away from the world. "I won't let them take her," Elias said firmly. "I'll keep her safe, no matter what." The Queen studied him for a long moment. There was a flicker of something, perhaps gratitude, or perhaps something deeper in her gaze. "I can't do this alone," she said finally, her voice softening. "You've shown me that." Elias met her eyes. There was no turning back now. He had a duty, not just to the girl, but to the Queen and to the promise he had made. "I'll protect her," Elias said again, his voice low but resolute. "We'll figure this out together." And in that moment, the weight of their shared purpose settled over them both. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but Elias was ready. Because sometimes the smallest hands can shift the course of an empire, and Elias would do whatever it took to protect the girl who had been forgotten by everyone but him. The palace was a maze of corridors and chambers, each one more opulent than the last. Yet Elias felt none of the grandeur. The deeper he ventured into its hidden corners with the girl by his side, the more he realized just how disconnected the Queen's empire had become from the people it was meant to serve. Elias had only been a janitor, a shadow in the background of this sprawling empire, but now he was something more. He was a protector, and in his heart, he knew that this role was something he would never give up. The girl, still fragile and unsure, had started to trust him. It was a slow process, small gestures of confidence, a quiet smile when he made her laugh, the way she no longer flinched at his touch. Elias watched the transformation in her, but he could see the pain still lingering behind her eyes. It was clear that no matter how much they tried to shield her, the scars from her years of isolation were still there. They had been through so much, and yet, in the quiet moments when the world seemed to pause, there was a fragile bond forming between them. She was no longer just the lost princess. She was a child, a frightened soul seeking refuge, and Elias had become the only one she trusted to keep her safe. In the evenings, Elias would sit with her in the small, dimly lit alcove, listening as she slowly began to share pieces of her story. She spoke of the vents, how they became her sanctuary, how she had learned to survive in a world that had forgotten her. Elias could see the trauma in her eyes, the quiet sorrow that no child should ever have to endure. "What did you dream of?" Elias asked one night, his voice gentle. The question felt trivial in the face of everything she had endured, but he wanted to know, he needed to understand her world. The girl paused for a moment, then met his gaze. "I dreamed of being seen," she whispered. "I dreamed of not being forgotten." Elias's heart ached. He had never truly understood what it meant to be invisible, to live in the shadows. But now, with this girl, he could feel it in his bones. Her pain was real. And it wasn't just the pain of a missing child, it was the pain of a broken system, a system that had failed her at every turn. As the days passed, Elias found himself more deeply involved in her world. It wasn't just about protecting her anymore, it was about making her feel whole again, about giving her the space to heal. And for the first time in a long while, Elias felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't just cleaning the halls anymore, he was helping to rebuild something far more precious than marble floors. The quiet peace they had built was shattered when a whispered rumor reached Elias's ears. Someone new. Someone in the palace had discovered that the princess, the lost heir, was alive and hidden in the shadows of the very building that should have protected her. The news hit Elias like a punch to the gut. He had known that the palace was full of eyes, sneaky, observant, and dangerous. The question wasn't if someone would find out. It was when. He moved quickly, his heart racing as he rushed through the dimly lit corridors. He had to get to the girl. They had to hide, and fast. His mind was spinning with questions. Who had betrayed them? Who had sold the girl's location to the wrong people? When Elias reached the alcove, the girl was gone. Panic flared in his chest. He darted down the halls, looking for her, his pulse pounding in his ears. He didn't know who to trust anymore. Then, he saw her. She was standing near the royal archives, eyes wide and filled with terror. She looked like a cornered animal, but the moment she saw Elias, her expression softened. "I heard them," she whispered. "They know." Elias didn't need to ask who they were. He already knew. It was the same people who had failed her, the ones who had kept her hidden in the dark for years. They hadn't wanted her back, they had wanted her silenced. "Come with me," Elias said urgently, grabbing her hand. They couldn't stay here. The girl was in more danger than she could possibly understand. But before they could move, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Elias froze. He looked at the girl, his grip tightening. "Go," he hissed. "Hide now." The girl didn't hesitate. She disappeared into the shadows, vanishing before Elias could take another breath. Elias turned to face the approaching guards, his heart pounding. He had no time to plan, no time to think. He had only one choice. "I won't let you take her," he said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. The guards stopped, eyeing him with suspicion. One of them stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. "You're in the way, Janitor." The guard sneered. "Move, or we'll make you." Elias didn't move. He couldn't. Not when the girl's life was at stake. For the first time, he wasn't just a janitor. He was something more, someone who would fight, even if it meant his life. He was her protector, and he would die before he let them take her. Elias didn't have time to reflect on the confrontation with the guards. The moment he had stood his ground, the entire balance of power in the palace seemed to shift. He had become a target, one that no one had expected. The palace walls that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a cage. As he helped the girl into a safe, hidden room deep within the palace, his mind raced. The betrayal ran deeper than just the guards. There were whispers, dark, secretive whispers about the girl's return. Some saw her as a threat to the throne, others as an opportunity to secure their own positions, but none of that mattered to Elias. He had promised to protect her, and that was exactly what he would do. Yet, even he couldn't ignore the fact that the queen, her own mother, had been silent. There was no word from her, no command, no sign that she was coming to their aid. Hours passed before the queen finally appeared. Elias had expected anger, accusations, or demands, but when the queen entered the room, there was only exhaustion in her eyes. She didn't look like a ruler. She looked like a woman on the verge of breaking. "She's been found, hasn't she?" the queen asked softly, her voice breaking the silence. Elias nodded. "They're coming for her, Your Majesty. They know she's here." The queen didn't react. She simply closed her eyes, as if she were bracing herself for something. Then, she turned to face the girl, who had been quietly sitting in the corner, her gaze fixed on the floor. "I don't know what to do," the queen whispered, almost as though speaking to herself. "The Empire will never accept her. They'll never accept me as her mother. My position will be destroyed." The girl looked up at her mother for the first time, her eyes cold, distant. "You left me," she said, her voice barely audible. "You forgot me." The queen's face softened with grief, but there was no denying the truth in her daughter's words. She had failed her. She had allowed her to disappear, to hide in the shadows for so long. "I didn't mean to," the queen whispered, her voice shaking. "But I was afraid. I didn't know how to protect you. I didn't know how to love you the way you needed." The girl said nothing, but Elias could feel the weight of the queen's words. The bond between mother and daughter had been severed, but there was still a glimmer of hope if they could find a way to heal the wounds, to rebuild the trust that had been lost. "I will protect her," Elias said, his voice strong. "If you can't, I will. I made a promise." The queen met his gaze, and for the first time, she seemed to see him not as a janitor, but as something more. "I don't know what to do," she repeated, her voice full of sorrow. "You don't have to do it alone," Elias replied. "You have me, and I have her." The queen nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. In that moment, Elias knew that the fight for the girl's future had only just begun. The tension in the palace had reached a boiling point. The whispers of the missing princess were no longer confined to the shadows they had spread throughout the corridors, and those loyal to the throne were starting to question the queen's choices. Elias could feel the pressure building. Every day, more guards patrolled the halls, more spies lurked in the corners, watching their every move. Elias didn't know who to trust anymore. Even the queen seemed uncertain of where her allies stood, and the girl, her daughter, remained silent, her trust in the world shattered. It was in the dead of night when the queen summoned him. She stood at the balcony, her eyes fixed on the distant stars, as if seeking answers from the heavens themselves. Elias approached cautiously, the weight of his promise heavy on his chest. "You've been silent," Elias said quietly. "You've done nothing to protect her." The queen didn't flinch at his words. "I'm afraid," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "Afraid that if I reveal her to the world, I will lose everything: my power, my throne, my empire. If the nobles find out, they'll use her to destroy me." Elias could see the truth in her eyes. Her fear was real, but so was the pain it caused. Her daughter had been living in the shadows for years, and the queen's desperation had only driven them farther apart. "I've already lost everything," the queen continued. "I can't lose her too." Elias's heart ached. The queen's fear wasn't about losing power, it was about losing her child, the one thing she had never truly been able to protect. "You don't understand," the queen said, turning to face him. "The Empire will never accept her. They will never accept me. I've failed as a mother, as a ruler." Elias stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "You haven't failed her yet. You can still protect her, but you need to stop hiding. She needs you. We need you. This empire, the people, they'll follow you if you lead them with honesty, not fear." The queen's gaze softened. She seemed to consider his words, as if for the first time seeing a path forward. "What if I can't make them understand?" she asked, her voice breaking. "You can," Elias said quietly, "but only if you stop running. Only if you show them who you really are." The queen didn't respond immediately. She stared out at the stars, lost in thought. Finally, she nodded. "I have no choice. If I want to save her, if I want to save myself, I must tell the truth." Elias didn't speak. He simply nodded, knowing the battle they would soon face would be far greater than anything they had encountered before. But for the first time in a long while, the queen was no longer hiding. And that, Elias knew, was the beginning of something that could change everything. The queen stood before the assembly of nobles, her posture regal yet vulnerable, her gaze unwavering. The grand hall of the palace was filled with tension, the air thick with whispers and uncertainty. She had called them all together, knowing full well the storm this revelation would unleash. But she had made her choice. It was time for the truth. Elias stood at her side, his presence a quiet anchor amidst the growing storm. The girl, the lost princess, stood behind the queen, her eyes wide with both fear and hope. This moment would define everything, not just for the queen, but for the future of the empire, and for the girl who had been hidden for so long. The queen took a deep breath, her voice echoing through the hall. "I have kept a secret, one that has haunted me for years, but no more. Today I reveal the truth." The nobles shifted uneasily, unsure of what was coming, but the queen pressed on. "This is my daughter," she said, her eyes meeting those of the girl, her voice soft but resolute. "The princess of Threxion. She has been hidden from the world, from you all, for reasons I can no longer explain away with power or politics." Gasps rippled through the room. The nobles exchanged looks of shock and disbelief. This was a revelation that would change everything. "The girl you thought was lost is here, and I will no longer hide her. She is my flesh and blood, and she deserves her place in this world just as much as any of you." The room fell silent. For the first time in years, the queen's words rang with sincerity, the weight of her guilt giving them more power than any decree she had ever made. "I have made mistakes," the queen continued, her voice trembling but strong. "I allowed fear to control me. I didn't protect her. I didn't love her the way a mother should." Elias's heart clenched as he saw the girl's gaze soften, the bitterness in her eyes starting to melt away. The queen had finally, truly, acknowledged the damage she had caused, but the real test was yet to come. Would the nobles accept the girl? Would they see her as the rightful heir, or would they see her as a threat? There was a long pause. And then, slowly, one of the nobles, a prominent senator from the east, stood and bowed his head. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice steady, "we have waited for a long time for the truth. We have waited for this moment, and now that it has come, we stand by you." One by one, the other nobles followed, acknowledging the queen and her daughter, offering their support. The empire that had once turned its back on her was now, slowly, coming to terms with the truth. The queen turned to Elias, a quiet gratitude in her eyes. He had stood by her side, unwavering, when the world had been against them both. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said softly. Elias simply nodded, his duty fulfilled. The girl, no longer a shadow in the vents, now stood beside her mother, not as a lost princess, but as a symbol of a new beginning. The empire had changed, and with it, a new legacy had begun.